there can be consent and there can also be harm. There might even also be pleasure. Some examples. I consented to sex with this man and it was amazing. Like, he gave me 15 orgasms, and it was only later that I discovered that he was married and he never spoke to me again. Now, of course, consent theorists will immediately argue, oh, that wasn't technically consensual. Okay, fine. By that legal definition. But like, in the moment, was I, yes? Did I consent in every possible concept of the word? Yes. Was it informed? No. Okay. Consent is actually pretty clear. What's not clear is that consent is the only barometer of harm. The barometers of harm for sex, if you had to really put them into some sort of framework, consent's really only a quarter of it. If you really want to avoid harm during sex, power awareness, trauma-informedness, attunement, and consent.
One of the things that I've heard you mention as it relates to this with this topic, and it's been a phrase that has really resonated with me a lot, is this idea of you can have consent and still cause harm.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could unpack that a little bit more for me.
Sure. So think of a Venn diagram and 3 circles. The first is acts that are consensual. The second is acts that are pleasurable. And the third is acts that are harmful. Okay? So where pleasure and consent overlap and harm doesn't overlap, that's what we're all told to go for, right? Should be pleasurable and should be consensual. But there's plenty of sex that's not pleasurable, right? That the meh sex that so much of society talks about, right? That's consensual and neither harmful nor pleasurable. Meh, right? But where it gets complicated is that there can be consent and there can also be harm. There might even also be pleasure. Some examples. I consented to sex with this man and it was amazing, and he completely, he gave me 15 orgasms, and it was only later that I discovered that he was married and he never spoke to me again. And he made me, Now, of course, consent theorists will immediately argue, oh, that wasn't technically consensual. Okay, fine. Right? By that legal definition. But in the moment, was I, yes? Did I consent in every possible, concept of the word? Yes. Was it informed? No. Okay. What about consent that sex that I absolutely had that was amazing and juicy and yummy, and then all of a sudden I could feel him disconnecting. It was really loving and slow, and in that moment I was really into it. And then it started pounding and getting super hard and fast and intense, and he put his hands around my throat, and I was kind of curious in that moment. I wasn't sure whether or not I consented or not. I mean, I was into it a little, I was like, oh, this is exciting and different, but I definitely was okay with it at the time, and now I just feel violated. I don't care if it's fair or not. I don't trust him anymore. Yes, it was not it was consensual, but he completely took advantage of me. He didn't attune to me. He didn't he became almost like a different person. I allowed it to happen, but I am really closed to him now. I'm really skeptical of him now. I don't trust him. I consented to, I definitely said yes to him putting his hands around my throat because I was curious about it, but the act wasn't the problem. It was the way he did it. There was something that came over him in his eyes that just freaked me out. And it was he got all murderous all of a sudden. Yeah, I consented. But now there's such disconnection. I don't trust him to be attuned to me. I don't trust him to be aligned with me. I mean, this is the world that we're all walking around in when it comes to sex. And a lack of attunement can be harmful. Not just, oh gosh, I really wish you'd be more present. Really harmful. The emergence of energies that are not welcome in the space of violence or of of triggering actions or words can be really harmful and disruptive. And we ought or even I totally consented to sex with that facilitator, at that workshop. I mean, yeah, I know that like he's not supposed to like sleep with his students, but like I was really into it. He was really like sexy, and he was like taught us so much, and like the sex was really good.
Mhm.
But now, like everybody else in the workshop is like really like suspicious of me and tense with me, and like also he's just like ignoring me completely, and he's not like honoring the connection that we had. He told me that he was like really excited about me, and I thought that we were like, I thought he loved me.
Hmm.
I consented. Real harmful.
Hmm.
Dishonesty, betrayal causes harm. Consent doesn't speak to those things, and it's not frankly meant to. Consent is frankly like mostly a legal structure, and what a lot of consent theorists have done is try to make consent mean everything. Make consent the umbrella in which we put, oh, like it wasn't consensual if it wasn't attuned. It wasn't consensual if it wasn't completely informed. It wasn't consensual if he didn't like specify that he wasn't going to be emotionally available. Like, not, I mean, you could parse this all, you know, try to make consent mean everything, but no, like consent is actually pretty clear. What's not clear is that consent is the only barometer of harm. The power, like the barometers of harm for sex, if you had to like really like put them into some sort of framework, consent's really only a quarter of it. If you really want to avoid harm during sex, power awareness, trauma-informedness, attunement, and consent.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And that's if you want to avoid harm. If you want to avoid crimes, then just, make sure you get consent. It's just so gross. Even like it feels gross in my body to just say get consent. Like just make sure you get consent before you do anything. Ugh. That's not how humans are meant to interact. We're not permission issuing machines. Like
Yeah.
we need to be attuned to each other, especially in sex. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this great quote from Maya Dusenberry, who used to be the editor at Feministing, who said, like, God help us if the best thing that we can say about our sex is that it was consensual.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, that's
truly.
what I honestly, I was thinking about that as you were talking about that. Even I'm curious about even the angle of like, okay, these are the things that are required to avoid harm, which might be like a baseline for like how to like the beginning of like having great sex, but that's also not having great sex, right?
Well,
It's
here's
like
the thing. Okay,
avoiding
great.
harm.
There
Which
is
is at the
there
same time.
there you will find tens of thousands of brilliant people to be on your podcast who can teach you how to have great sex.
Hmm.
You know, my focus is on having sex responsibly and avoiding harm. That's like that, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm not going to be the expert on having great sex, although everybody wants me to be. But that's really right. Like ironically, however, what I will say is that being power informed, like truly like orienting yourself to like where is the power in this sexual dynamic happening right now, especially if we're doing kinky or power play. But like where is the power in this dynamic? Where's house are we at? How well does she know me? How well does she trust me? How much do I understand about her trauma history? Right? Am I trauma informed? How much do I understand about my trauma responses and her trauma responses or his? How much do I know about how I act in trauma? How well am I handling my traumas? To what degree am I using sex as validation, as status seeking? And to what degree am I willing to erase my agency? How much of my own work have I done? How safe a partner am I, even as a sub or bottom? Um, Attuned. Am I attuned to myself? Can I recognize what's happening in my own body? Have I just numbed myself with drugs and alcohol and these days GHB and ketamine to the point of like I can't even sense myself in my own body, and like I'm using these drugs to like get me into a space where I can quote consent, where all of a sudden I'm open and wet or hard. To what degree am I sensing into this person? Like, are they inebriated? Is this even beyond like their capacity to consent? Is this right relationship for us? Is this just, is this me taking advantage of the fact that they just got dumped and are kind of vulnerable and wanting reassurance? Like, is this totally consensual in this moment and they wanting some sort of sexual reassurance and validation, but they're probably going to like lose a lot of trust and this is going to be detrimental to our dynamic in the long run? Is this sex aligned? Truly aligned? And especially for the tops or penetrative partners or the initiators in the dynamic, what responsibility, and frankly, I believe that the tops in any kind of dynamic have more responsibility to stop an interaction or slow it down. Am I conscious of, right? Am I power aware in that way? Am I wielding that power well of being the initiator and the top?
Yeah.
Not to mention all the societal imperatives to like go along with whatever the top does, and the physical safety imperatives. I mean, there's a lot there. And then finally, is it consensual? I guess the point that I was going to say is if we do all that, in my very, very, very detailed professional experience, the sex will be better. It really will. It does, like, right? Like all those people who are like, the consent edifice just makes me like have to like ask at every stage.
Yeah.
Right? And it makes things less sexy. Power awareness, trauma-informedness, and attunement, like all that will lead to like really juicy, good communication and attunement. And you might find yourself selecting totally different partners than you would if you were just oriented around like, can I do this? Is it okay if I touch you there? Is it okay if I do this? Yes, yes, yes. Like, oh, God. What a pushy, aggressive, intense, also somehow needy way of being.
Yeah. Yeah.
Clementine Morgan, who does the Fucking Cancel podcast. You know her?
Yeah. I follow her. Yeah.
Oh. Edgy, challenging, controversial, but brilliant. She came up with this model called the attunement model of consent, right? Which she contrasts with the contractual model, right? People in the play party communities here in the Bay Area talk about nonverbal consent, right? Just ways of thinking about like the imperative of being with rather than getting consent. If your orientation, right? You also talked about this is a game, right? Consent lends itself to a finite game. Did I get consent so I could get what I wanted? It's a very finite game, right? What I just offered is a way of accessing infinite game.
Yeah.
There's no goal of getting anywhere, right?
Yeah.
The idea is attunement.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what really started unlocking this for me with what you're talking about was I was at Lightning in a Bottle, and I was at a music festival in California, and there was like this I don't know, some sort of experience where we were doing like a shared I think touching thing or some sort of like contact yoga, I think is what it was. And the leader of the session, she said to find somebody, make sure you get consent. And she was like, consent can be as simple as like eye contact and a smile, that person is like moving towards you, and like trusting that. And like there's something in that, to your point, for me around like the nonverbal consent, about the attunement part of it, that I'm like, that is what my soul had been missing so much in the conversation around it, where it's like, oh, this is actually what I'm really looking for, and it's what I feel when I was acting. It's what I was feeling when I was dancing with somebody. It's what I'm feeling when I'm having great sex or connecting with somebody. Or like, it's so easy to get into all the abstractions and the rules and the books and the things, but then like when you're actually with people, when you're finding that attunement, right, and that ability to tap into how others are, how you're feeling. And this is honestly even one of the things that inspired me. You and I were talking about prior, that I went to all these shows and these festivals, and it's been such a big learning of my own journey, because I was around people, especially after being in COVID and lockdown for such a long time, right, where it was like, oh, here's this opportunity to actually like practice all the stuff that I've learned from personal growth work or whatever it might be. It's like, if we're not actually like interacting with people, if we're not practicing the attunement in reality and amongst others, then we're kind of just sitting in a cave and mentally masturbating in one way or another.
Indeed. Oh, indeed. And yeah, and the arenas in which we could practice the skills of relating and attuning and just being human with each other are so wonderfully varied. I think festivals can be really brilliant. I know a number of people who are festivals are really, really not great spaces for people who are heavily on the spectrum, who benefit from in-depth conversations with with who are like trying to attune to lots of different groups who are also on drugs like all at once. Is actually like not just not healthy, but can lead to like radical disintegrity moments that can set someone back a lot. um, Play parties is another example that can be, I mean, they're incredibly heightened spaces in terms of danger, right? We are, especially any kind of sex positive space, we're taking huge risks with our bodies, with our identities,
Yeah.
as even just our identities as like safer, good people. I know a lot of canceled men who are like, wow, I didn't realize the degree of risk I was taking by just entering into a space where I wasn't exquisitely perfect at the skills of attunement. You know, where like now I'm like ostracized and like have like this really terrible reputation because I was like really unattuned and like let my desire become agenda and like like violated some people's consent, or even in like very subtle ways, but enough to make people be like, nope, like, banned. Right. I know people from this in the kink community, in the festivals communities, in Burning Man, in in a lot of the alternative world. And yeah, I just want to. I've just felt like especially because you're familiar with the festival world, like the need to name just how dangerous these spaces are. Dangerous. Oh, I feel so like Nancy Reagan here. Like I equate like I equate sex positive spaces with like Formula One cars, and we're all babies getting into Formula One cars. Like,
Yeah.
really, truly, like going to a play party, like carrying with us like the incredible amount of racism and internalized sexism and internalized misogyny and internalized self-hatred. If you haven't done your work, like going into like a super liberated space can be like an incredibly bad idea. Just like an incredibly risky thing to you, to your reputation, to your body, to your sense of safety. Like it's the anyway. I don't know. You didn't ask me about this particularly, but like I needed to name that yeah, we have a tendency to jump in head first and experience, but boy, we carry all of our traumas in with us, and we can often do harm.
Yeah. Agreed.